Courage and honor, cousin.
Into the fires of battle, unto the anvil of war.
Hello, and welcome to Warhammer 40k's Grim History from Beyond. I'm Zeckthar, and welcome to the second bonus box on one of the least talked about chapter masters, Tushan. Now, last time we discussed Tushan, I made mention that he became good friends with the chapter master of the Blood Angels, Louis Dante. What we'll be covering today is a time that even the venerable Dante stood in amazement at Tushan's strength, as well as his unfaltering loyalty. Now, after the Second War of Armageddon, years passed with both chapters going about their business. Yet they still kept in touch, and it wasn't long before the two had set up a meeting on the planet Hecatomb to exchange trophies of war and, quite frankly, have a friendly chat. Now, Hecatomb would not be a place I would personally set up a meeting, as the planet was pretty inhospitable. Rust-red sands skirled across its barren plains, with storm winds eddying down from the northern mountains, as massive volcanoes bubbled forth lava and spit fire. Now, mind you, these volcanoes were pretty small potatoes compared to anything the son born of Nocturne would have seen from their home planet. Yet, it still did remind Tushan and his honor guard of the Fire Drakes a little of home. Now, speaking of the Fire Drakes, let's talk about them for a bit. Now, during the Great Crusade by their primarch Vulcan, the Fire Drakes were so named for the greatest of the salamander saurids, of the same name said to originate beneath the stones of Mount Deathfire, the largest volcano of the salamander's homeworld of Nocturne. The Fire Drakes were the finest and most experienced warriors of the ancient 18th Legion, and the later Salamander chapter. To be afforded this exalted status, mere skill at arms was not enough, and the warrior would have to have proven his faultless bravery, and just as importantly, faultless self-control. These venerable warriors are almost a breed apart from their fellow salamanders. The transition they have made to the vaunted ranks of the First Company has changed them in a myriad of ways, as they have fully embraced the full evolution of their genetic encoding. As opposed to most of their chapter, the Fire Drakes are barracked on the moon of Prometheus, along with the chapter master himself, the only salamanders whose home garrison is not amongst the civilian population of Nocturne. Now, unlike their fellow battle brothers, the Fire Drakes are seldom seen on the surface of Nocturne, where the other salamanders readily cohabitate with the unaugmented human populace, albeit often as part of a solitary lifestyle. Their rites are ancient and clandestine, conducted by Chapter Master Tushan himself. Only those who have undergone the most heinous of trials and endured hardships beyond imagining could ever hope to aspire to become a Fire Drake. Now, because of their solitary traditions, the Fire Drakes are fairly close, their brotherhood as tightly knit as if they were bloodkin. For this trip, Tushan has brought 4 of his Fire Drakes, a great honor. Zadir, the oldest of the group and rather cantankerous for a salamander. Icanius, the youngest and newest member of the group. Even though he has proven himself a Fire Drake, he still dreams himself not worthy enough, pushing for greater deeds, giving him the not-so-fond nickname of Vanguard. Vulcanus, who is as strong as a warrior as he is in the forge. Massive in size, he even rivals Master Tushan in strength. And last but certainly not least, we have Zacchus, who would have been an excellent chaplain if he wasn't such a mighty warrior. He is gifted in the knowledge of the old ways, including the sacred tongue of Nocturne. Now, as they travel through the swirling sands and the brutal heat, the Drakes begin a light-humorous exchange of how it compares little to the volcanic storms from Nocturne, in which Zacchus comments that the sulfuric smell doesn't even compare with Zadir's breath. To remind his brothers why they were there, yet wanted to get in a little on the humor, Tushan finished the conversation with a smile, saying, "Do not pity this world's anger. Bask in it. Defy it. And should it dissatisfy you, only then turn to Zadir for a true test of your courage." The laughter grew raucous. It was a rare thing, even though Fire Drakes were known for their choleric temperament. In that way, they had much in common with the Space Wolves. But the conversation was truly ended when they arrived at their destination, an old bastion of the Blood Angels made of smooth, pale granite. Well, the red sand had stained it and eroded some of the statuary clinging to its curved walls. A banner hung from a lancet arch above them, fluttering mournfully in the breeze. A wide archway granted admittance to the bastion. It might once have been large enough to allow mighty war engines through its missing gates, but it had sunk so low and awkwardly that only a warrior in power armor could pass through the archway now. 3 such warriors stood before it to greet them. Now, Tushan knew Isafel. The herald nodded to us as we approached. There was also Cassel, the seneschal, who was never far from his master's side. Between them stood a figure as noble and imperious as Tushan remembered. His war plate had been crafted to resemble unadorned muscle, albeit wrought from gilded adamantium and ceramite. Largest amongst his many gemstones was a ruby blood droplet emblazoned upon his chest, 2 angelic wings spreading out from it across his armored pectorals. A gold mask hid his face, adorning him, again made to look like the face of an unarmored man, and he wore an exquisite-looking axe at his hip. It had been years since Tushan and Dante had last met to honor the pledge. Here, on Hecatomb, at the sunken citadel, the ritual between the chapters would finally take place again. Now, I may interject here a time or two, but what comes next is from Tushan's own words, chronicled by Nick Kime. Please enjoy. As we reached the angels, I knelt, and so did my warriors. Rise, Tushan, all of you, said Dante, his voice melodic yet strong, and know you are amongst friends. As I arose, Dante gripped my wrist, in a manner of warriors, and we embraced as brothers. Well met, Tushan! He sounded pleased to see us. Tell me all that happened since we last spoke. A tale not as warm as this welcome, I'm afraid. I see. I noted Dante's warriors bowed respectfully, but did not shake hands with my drakes. The angels were often reserved in this way, poised always. I considered Dante's efforts towards me exceptional. The Lord of the Host went on in the same vein, clapping my shoulder guard. Then let us speak inside, out from the storm. I have some warm karash, all the way from Bale. Warmed by entropy, the blood droplet above the immense arch of the sunken citadel was a reminder of whose territory this was. As I passed under it, I was reminded of something else, the vaunted history of the angels and their taste for blood. The karash tasted hot and acerbic on my tongue. On Nocturne, I was used to something stronger, but the Baleite wine was not without flavor and potency. Dante watched me keenly, sipping at his chalice as I drained my own silver goblet dry in short order. Not one to save a wine, are you, Tushan? I reserve my indulgence for the forge, Dante. He laughed at that, as if amused at some private joke. Dante's chambers were dark and Spartan. Statues and banners, half hidden by the shadows, comprised what little decor there was within. Dante had removed his helm soon after entering the room, and sat cloaked in the darkness, on a simple iron throne. I took the one opposite, facing the Lord of Hosts, and the faded mosaic behind him. It depicted a pair of angels, one of the light and one of the dark, benevolent protector and wrathful avenger on both turns of the figurative coin. Duality of the self came through heavily in the symbolism. Artistic, beautiful, the mosaic suggested an internal struggle, one not fought with blades but willpower. I wondered what it meant and considered that I was reading too much into it. Sipping at his karash, which had a more coppery scent than the wine I was drinking, the Lord of the Blood Angels looked pensive as he read my reaction to the mosaic. I had already related the tale of the war that almost brought Nocturne to its knees, of the return of the dragon warriors, of the defection and subsequent corruption of 2 of my brothers. I needed the drink to quell my remembered anger, or my nerves. I could not be sure which. Here before me was Dante, one of the oldest and wisest chapter masters in the entire Adeptus Astartes. Our deeds, my own and my chapters, on Armageddon had earned his respect. A bond had been forged between us. At the end of the dragon strife, as some were calling it, I had need of his counsel more than ever. Now, I will interject here because Tushan doesn't give us much to go on other than the dragon warriors. Now, what he is referring to started with a former brother, Nihilin, who was originally a salamander librarian that turned renegade and joined the Chaos Space Marine warband known as the Dragon Warriors, led by the visionary former chaplain of the Black Dragons, Votan Ushorak. What took place is hard to fathom, but after the death of his old foe, Captain Kadaya, Nylon enlisted a warband of Iron Warriors to mine a special ore known as Fyron from the world of Scoria. It was during this time that the Chaos Sorcerer entered into a demonic pact with the demon Engelsach in order to enhance his already formidable psychic powers. The demon told Nylon of a forbidden tome that possessed the fell knowledge of the ancient Nocturnian corpse masters that had the ability to resurrect the dead. With this forbidden knowledge, Nylon hoped to resurrect his former master, Votan Urshak. In return for the demon's knowledge and the enhancement of his powers, the Chaos Sorcerer provided Engelsach a host body, enabling the demon to enter the material realm as a demon host and wreak havoc on the Salamander's chapter. It was during this conflict that Nylon finally revealed his nefarious plan, utilizing a seismic cannon that was emplaced on his flagship, the Chaos Cruiser Hellstalker. He created a shaft that delved deep into Mount Deathfire, the sacred mountain of the Salamanders on Nocturne. Within the mountain, the Chaos Sorcerer was able to breach the hidden sacred shrine that contained one of the lost books of the Primarch Vulcan, known as the Tome of Fire. The Chaos Sorcerer was confronted by the Salamander apostolary Pyrrhil, his former neophyte in training, whom he defeated in a psychic battle that resulted in the Salamander Psyker's death. Though it was a Pyrrhic victory, Pyrrhel's sacrifice was not in vain, as the Salamander's chief librarian Velkhana arrived to face his former pupil before Nylon could make good his escape. The chief librarian and the Chaos Sorcerer battled within Mount Deathfire, but unfortunately, Nylon made good his escape due to his timely intervention of his personal bodyguard, Romlek. The Chaos Sorcerer managed to escape, still intent on resurrecting his former master Ushrak and taking revenge against the Salamanders. And, unfortunately, Nylon's current whereabouts are still unknown. This was all swimming around Tushan's head, and even though he wasn't present on the planet when this all went down, he still felt responsible for it. I mean, after all, he was the regent of Prometheus. But getting back to our story, Dante spoke and then took another sip of his Karash. Master of a chapter, it is a heavy burden. Emperor knows I've felt it. He seemed wearisome, as if gripped by sudden listlessness. Dante had outlived many, seen much, and fought in hundreds of battles. Did his martial pride hide some latent sense of apathy? His next words prevented me from asking this question. Your world endures, your chapter also. I fail to see reason for doubt.
It isn't doubt, I said. If I am unworthy, another will replace me. None have stepped forward. I seek counsel to avoid the mistakes I have made before and to ward against future complacency.
And you think you were complacent?
I should have seen it, the canker worming within.
I felt the urge to lower my gaze, but resisted, not wanting to seem weak. I am not weak. My blood runs strong with Promethean fire, and my will is the same iron as it has ever been. But I know I have erred and must make restitution for that failing. I hope Dante would have some insight. Had you known, had you seen, it would have been little different. Dante was almost nonchalant, but I knew he was trying to ease the blow to my ego. I both hated and admired him for that.
What if there is something insidious at the heart of my chapter, Dante? Can it be purged?
With fire. His voice level, he remained sturdily neutral. This existence of ours has a way of corrupting even the most stalwart hearts, Tushan, and not just to ruin. Lest we forget we are still human, all but transcendent. You and your kin are perhaps the most human of us all. Even angels can misstep, brother. Our measure should not be how we come to do so, but rather in how we rectify it. Now I bowed my head, but out of respect, not shame.
As ever, I am humbled by your wisdom.
Do not be so. I only tell you what you already know. In you and your salamanders, I see the same nobility you perceive in me, Tushan. I admire your humanity. It is both your greatest strength and greatest weakness. You are contradictions, as am I.
I see only unimpeachable honor, brother.
Finishing off the last of his karash, he leaned forwards, and I saw the purity and divinity of his face, without the veil of shadow to obscure it. A being of true light. Then look closer. A strain of dark red mildly affected the sclera, but otherwise Dante's face was alive with undeniable power and deep wisdom. I remarked as much, at which he laughed sadly. A mask, I assure you, Touchon. At that moment, I did not understand what Dante meant. Esrafel entered the chamber and bowed, preventing any further inquiry. The time of the ritual was upon us. A gallery led from Dante's Spartan chambers to an audience hall, both magnificent and veneered by age. In the middle of the vaulted hall there lay a slab of black bale-like rock. Smooth as obsidian, unyielding as dacite, it possessed a non-angular shape to signify the old legion's designation of the Blood Angels. Zeckthars stood upon the slab. In place of his armor, the salamander wore Nocturnian ceremonial garb. His arms and legs were bare to display his branding scars, but his chest was clad in a metal breastplate. His shoulders and back were swathed by a long pelt of drake hide. A second pelt of leather covered his loins. Head bowed, and down on one knee like a supplicant before his watching lords and brothers, Zeckthars awaited introduction. I knew he would not dishonor me with what followed. Standing at the edge of the slab, Esrafel, the herald, spoke in a clear, clarion voice that carried to the entire hall. Here, then, we stand again, our two chapters aligned in fealty and honor. Although they were but four amongst a host of many, I saw the pride in the eyes of my honor guard at the herald's words. I know, for I felt it too. For a moment at least, brotherhood banished the specter of doubt and the burdens of being a chapter master. So it was on the first day, so it shall be again, and until the time of ending. Our pact of brotherhood is sealed by the exchange of battle honors. Blood meets fire, and each finds strength in the other. Ave Imperator. And as I echoed his final words and heard it echoed again in Dante and our warriors, I turned my attention to Zeckthars. His head slowly rose, and his fiery gaze met mine. Twin hammers emerged from where they had been tethered behind his back. He ignited the heads with a deft movement. Fire cast flickering shadows across the bale-like rock and reflected in the eyes of Zeckthars. I saw purpose and intensity. With a powerful shout, he sprang from his crouch, and the saga of Kugaroth began. Kugaroth had been a mighty, vengeful beast that had taken several of my fireborn to bring to heal and then slay. Artisans in the sanctuaries had wrought the monster's flesh into a banner that I now gifted to Dante. Zeckthars would present it through an ancient ritual. The Morgash was both a ceremonial war cry and an aggressive posture dance that relied on percussive hammer strikes against the metal breastplate and stamping foot movements. It was bellicose, a physical narration of how a war trophy had been won. The Blood Angels looked on, but their faces were unreadable. As hammer blows chimed stridently throughout the chamber, Dante turned to ask, the war cry, a vestige of old Nocturne? I nodded. Zeckthars thrust one hammer out in front of him, the other held in his mouth before he arched his neck to spit out a gout of flame. I noticed some of the angels flinch ever so slightly at the incendiary display, and I hid a proud smile. Zeckthars speaks the old language, I said to Dante, the sigil dialect of ancient Nocturne. Millennia ago, it was spoken by the first tribal kings and taught to them by Earth Shaman. Few now live who can speak it so fluently. The spit of fire died, and Zeckthars rang the hammers against his scorched breastplate. With a resonance of metal striking metal yet to fade, he put each fuller down, bowing to his lords as he did so, and took up the mantle of the Kugaroth. He thrusted it high like a spear, bellowing one last time to emulate the dying cry of the beast. And then it was done. Silence reigned for a short while, until Esrafel returned. He took the proffered banner of the Kugaroth from Zeckthars, who bowed and left the bale-light stone, before ushering in the Blood Angel pact offering. The ranks of the Blood Angels lining the edge of the chamber parted to admit Abathor. As a librarian, Abathor had a touch of the arcane and etheric about him that remained undiminished by his simple red robes. He wore the clothes of a tribune, not a psyker, and clutched a long roll of crumpled vellum in one strong, pale hand. In the other was a casket, long enough for a gladius. Lo, then, did the angels come to the hecatomb, and the sunken citadel of Regis Malefact. A sonorous tremor inflected Abathor's voice, a sampling of his witchery, as he regaled all with the tale of this dark champion's demise. His recitation was long and verbose, a far cry from the uncouth exhibition of our Death World tribesmen. Abathor described how the Blood Angels first came to Hecatomb, and how the dominion of Regis Malefact had been near absolute. His destruction was meted out by Dante himself, first breaking the champion's sword, and then cutting him down in turn. His blood was spilled in this very chamber, the demon inhabiting his flesh banished back into the eye. His bones were cast to ash, his essence forever sundered, said Abathor, his gaze upraised to engage his audience despite the length of unfurled parchment he was holding. Here, then, he brandished the casket, is the broken blade of Regis Malefact, rendered into dormant metal as a totem of Lord Dante's triumph over... The halt was so sudden, I failed to see what was wrong at first. Abathor? Dante asked. Scattered, confused muttering came from the onlookers. Abathor was staring at his feet, at the crack in the bale-light slab that had miraculously just formed. I saw it too, as did Dante and now several others, but my attention was now on the casket. It too had cracked, and the strange unlight, like natural darkness, only more pervasive, came spilling through the fissures in the stone. Scratching, like nails against stone, resonated around the chamber. I heard voices in it, though they spoke in a tongue foreign to an earthly realm. Above, my eyes were drawn to the shadows that had shrunk away from the unlight and were coalescing into forms that had arched backs and long, curved horns. Several blood angels had already reached for their blades. Some had them half drawn when one of their battle brothers in the throng collapsed in profound and unexpected apoplexy. Out on the slab, Abathor dropped the parchment and the casket, holding out his hand in a warning as Dante tried to approach him. Stay away, my lord, he said, the effort of speaking a strain. Something is wrong. His head lurched back, body convulsing, as a font of blood spewed from his throat and into the air. Abathor fell to his knees. His eyes were aflame, his body too soon after. Abathor! Cried Esafel. I felt Zedir's hand upon my shoulder. He had been joined by Acanis and Vulcanus, who closed in protectively around me. Zacchus was on another side of the slab watching Abathor die, as were we all. Vapor issued in smoking tendrils from the blood the librarian had vomited up. As it coalesced, one tendril congealing with another, forms began to manifest. Blades slipping from scabbards filled the audience hall with a dissonant echo. I heard the racking of bolter slides. Dante had donned his death mask. Instead, I wore a savage snarl. As I saw the enemy now before us, I cried out, Demons! The words still ringing in my ears, and my hammer was already in my hands as I attacked them. The creatures in the blood smoke were denizens of the warp. Wiry, with crimson skin, the hardness of adamantium, they were a warrior breed, and one my kind had fought for centuries. His axe a sliver of leaping gold in his gauntleted fist. We fell upon the demons with abandon. As I crushed the skull of one of the horned creatures with my hammer, I saw the smoldering carcass of Abathor in my peripheral vision. What is this devilry? Asked Zedir, smiting one of the creatures with his glaive. I scowled. We have seen this before. Something has broken through into our reality, and using poor Abathor as the bridge. His defenses were breached without him knowing, said Dante, cleaving a demon in half. Something in the casket, and the broken blade. My eyes were drawn to where it lay bare and revealed on the slab. I smashed another demon's ribcage, its body dissolving, even before I had ruptured its spine. Sporadic bolter fire cut into the rising sound of the melee, but at such close quarters it was short-lived. The growl of chain blades and the harsh ozone snap activation of power weapons prevailed. How many? I called to Dante, even though he was fighting at my side. He sighed the red-skinned devil from groin to sternum, and it collapsed into ether like all the others we had banished. A second was decapitated by Dante's backswing. Enough, he replied, hewing a third demon through the breastbone, then wrenching the axe blade free as the creature rapidly atrophied. No two banishments were the same. Some devolved into Icarus sludge, others turning into smoke or self-immolated. Their deaths were a myriad. Through the nature of the demonic foot soldiers remained uniformed as they peered in the chamber like sparks thrown from a furnace. Brutal hand-to-hand combat boiled at the heart of the room until every man and demon was fully engaged. Through the carnage, I saw Zeckthars fighting with the Black Smiter's Fuller. "Stay close to the chapter master," I heard Zedir remind the others. They needed no urging, but had to fight hard to keep up with me, and I with Dante. His blade threshed limbs and necks, carved torsos and split skulls. My muscles burned from the effort of breaching hardened demon hide, but Dante was tireless. Fury overtook him, cascading in a red rain from the creatures he slew. "Sanguinius!" He shouted his father's name, and it was as if something old and primal awoken from within him. The Lord of Hosts became wrath, and as he butchered, I heard a roar emerge out of the tumult of battle. Like a brazier lit in a darkened room, all eyes fell upon a blood angel rampaging through the morass of bodies. Feral rage twisted his features, and bearing chain swords in his hands, no longer able to distinguish friend from foe. "Brother Axenor!" shouted Dante at the frenzied warrior. Instead of wrath, the Lord of Hosts cried out in grief and anguish. He made for Axenor. I did not understand what was happening, only the primacy of the threat in our midst. Demons were still amongst us. I was about to order my warriors to follow Dante when Vulcanus growled a warning. "Fire drakes, look! The corpse!" Abathor, believed to have been destroyed, was crawling and dragging his smoldering remains towards the broken blade of Ragus Malefact. I had no doubt now that the dark symbolism of this place had lain in wait to exact vengeance against those who had put its master asunder. Some vestige of the champion remained, perhaps bound in the broken fragments of his old blade, and it was using the husk of Abathor to reach it. That could not happen. Dante and his warriors clashed against the growing tides of madness, afflicting some of the blood angels, but I knew our mission was to stop whatever was rising from Abathor's ashes. It now clambered to its feet, blackened robes sagging beneath its arms like diaphanous wings. "Destroy it, brothers!" I cried. "Don't let it take the broken blade!" The melee split, the blood angels led by Dante fighting their own deranged kin, and a small knot of salamanders trying to prevent something terrible. Zeckthars had been trying to reach us the moment the skirmish had broken out. He had heard my order and got to Abathor before any of us. Except it was not Abathor. Not anymore. A revenant regarded Zeckthars through fire-seared orbs, its skin a blackened parchment. Despite its ostensible frailty, it ignored the hammer strikes of Zeckthars and sent him sprawling with a single desultory blow. His cry of agony sounded above the furious battle taking place in the chamber. "Zeckthars!" Vulcanus was about to rush in when Zedir held him back. "Wait," he said. "Divided it will kill us. Together, brother!" Vulcanus nodded, but I saw his concern for Zeckthars. "As one, then," I said, unable to keep the snarl from my voice. We charged, bellowing Vulcan's name, beseeching the Primarch for his courage and strength to overcome evil. Muttered imprecations spewed from the scorched remains of Abathor as he turned to face us. It was a wretched, horrible end for such a vaunted warrior, and I grieve for Dante's chapter to have such a dark episode now forever engraved in their historic annuals. Ever the vanguard that was his namesake, Sanguinius leapt in first. He had a sword in each hand, a harp in the left that he used to lead, and a cascara in his right. The attack came as a blur of adamantium. Chunks of burned flesh and even bone slivers fell from the Abathor revenant as Sanguinius cut it apart. It raised a clawed hand against him, but Sanguinius severed it at the wrist. I lifted my hammer against the thing, but it battered me back with a heavy blow that cracked the ceramite of my armor. Zedir clattered into the back of me, and we both staggered. Vulcanus had fallen back, crouched down to drag his brother away from the killing field. Sanguinius cleaved into its shoulder and neck in an attempt to decapitate it. Intent on the killing stroke, he missed its return blow, which dug deep into his gut, tearing through armor and mesh like it was parting the scales of a fish. The cascara fell from his blood-slick grasp. Zadir dragged Amiss off the revenant, and then the embedded claws withdrew with a sickening tearing of flesh. Blood gushed freely down Amiss' torso and abdomen. With no strength left in his legs, he collapsed. Blood gushed freely down Amiss' torso and abdomen. With no strength left in his legs, he collapsed. Zadir and Vulcanus returned to my side to avenge their fallen brother.
"Take it apart!"
I roared, hammer high as I waded in.
"Every wretched piece!"
I went in low, snapping one of the revenant's legs from under it. It flailed, hissing vitriol, and I caught a glance of the demon kind struggling to manifest through Abathor's borrowed flesh. Realizing it was outmatched, it turned and hobbled towards the knife. I buried my hammer into its back, actinic fire wreathing its form and crackling azure heat and corpuscent. A single swing took out its standing leg and it crumpled. Still, it crawled on its belly.
"Don't let it touch the blade! Kill it now!"
Zadir impaled it to the ground with his glaive, lodging the weapon two-handed as Vulcanus staved in the revenant's skull with his maul.
"Nothing remains,"
I growled to my brothers, and together we reduced poor Abathor's corpse into tenderized meat and ash. I gasped for breath by the time it was over, and saw Vulcanus and Zadir do the same. Elsewhere, the demons were all but vanquished. Summoning my strength, I crushed what remained of the broken blade, and saw its power shattered. A flash of dark light filled the chamber, and somewhere amidst the fell, echoing voices I heard a discordant scream.
"It's over,"
I said, to myself more than my brothers. Dante had said there was something in the blade. Sheathing his weapons, Vulcanus went to Zeckthars. Zadir came to my side, watching as the Blood Angels finished their work. He wrenched his glaive free, returning it to the clasp on his back. I think the offering was a little misguided, he uttered.
"Something had been harbored in the blade. When he came in contact with Abathor, he became the conduit for the blood of Regis Malefact, and the thing half bonded to the blade in his hand.
It possessed him. I heard the voice of Dante from across the chamber. He and his angels had their backs to us. And destroying the demons sprung from Malefact's blood. A passage in the chaos had formed between the Blood Angels and the Salamanders. I noticed something else, too. Bodies of red-armored warriors. Most wore their battle helms, but some bared their crazed features openly. Such madness I saw in their eyes. And still, Dante and the others had not turned.
"Exenor?"
I asked, inquiring about the Blood Angel I had seen driven to frenzy. "Dead," uttered Dante, his back still to me, and a feral snarl in his tone. Though his power armor masked it, he was breathing hard, as were his brothers. I stepped forwards, believing the danger over and letting my drakes tend to their wounded. Closer to the angels, I saw some of their bodies at their feet had been mauled, their throats torn out. I saw Casil crouched down, drinking the blood from the dead. I discerned other things, half hidden by shadow, violent spasms, exsanguination, a crimson smear across the mouth, a savage countenance, an imbibing of blood.
What is this, Dante?"
I asked, uncertain. I had the resistant urge to draw my hammer again, telling myself there had to be some explanation. "Stay back!" the Lord of Hosts warned, his death mask glinting on the ground. Artless splatter marred its polished golden surface. I risked another step. By now, Vulcanus and Zadir had noticed what was happening and were on their feet. "Come no closer!" Again, Dante snarled. It was louder this time, loud enough for me to detect the unearthly tremor in his voice.
What is upon you, brother?"
I reached out, my brother's shoulder almost close enough for me to touch.
"Please, let me help."
Dante turned, whirled around, faster than a cracked whip. He struck the side of my unprotected face with the back of his hand, so hard it lifted me off my feet. I scrambled, tumbling, but managed to land in a half-crouch. There was blood in the air. I could taste it, that familiar coppery tang upon my tongue. I shook my head, groggy from the blow, and looked up into the face of my attacker. Dante growled. Blood dripped down his bare chin, splattering against the discarded death mask. I tried to reach him, to get through the feral thing that Dante had become.
"Brother, Come to your senses!
As he snarled, I saw red-rimmed teeth. Fangs protruded over pale crimson-flecked lips. At least 3 bodies lay at his feet, their throats torn out. He meant to turn on me next. I could see it in his eyes, those pitiless orbs awash with fury. The blood had enslaved him. It had taken every one of them and ripped away all sense. Monsters, not angels, were standing before us. In the dim light of the audience hall, I saw his honor guard resolve like crimson specters. Ruby-like eyes, taut with hunger, measured us.
Dante?
I tried one final time before knowing reason had fled this place. I backed away, 3 slow steps. Not to flee. I needed more room to fight. I let the hammer's haft slide through my gauntleted fingers before I firmly seized the grip. Volcanus and Zedir followed my lead, edging back and unsheathing their weapons.
No guns,
I warned. To raise arms against our honored allies was bad enough without shooting at them. I tried not to consider the ramifications if we actually killed one of them, or they us. Volcanus grunted, dragging Zeckthars behind us, before hefting his shield and maul. He left the mace head deactivated, but I could see his desire to power it. Zedir was Thimian, descended from the tribe of barbarians and huntsmen. He needed no reason to seek a belligerent course. Unsheathing his glaive, he thrusted it forwards like a goad.
Master Tushan,
I heard Echinas behind me. His voice was weak. He had lost a lot of blood.
We cannot prevail. I know,
I said. My eyes were unyielding like the demeanor as they met those of Dante and his prowling warriors. The angels had fallen. They had bled their own to cease the mindless rampaging of the afflicted, and now they wanted to bleed us too.
If we must die, we'll die on our feet,
I declared to my brothers.
Onto the anvil!
They echoed my cries one before the angels fell upon us. A red surge swept out from the shadows, fangs glistening in the half-light. They almost immediately overwhelmed us, dragging at our limbs, pushing us down to try to bear our throats to their hunger. Our only advantages were the fact that they couldn't tear into us at once and that the blood fever made them reckless. I hoped also that some vestige of sanity yet remained, and, through the fog of blood, some part of the angels still perceived allies and were trying to hold back. Volcanus and Zedir fought as 2 sides of a triangle with me at the apex and Echinas and Zeckthars between us. They battered the thirsting blood angels back, but did little more than repel them for a few seconds. Dante came for me. Mercifully, the axe mortalis lay discarded, forgotten his blood-red fury. I held him at bay with the haft of my thunderhammer, pressing against his armored chest, but his strength and ferocity was still enough to bear me down. Like vermin, his warriors began to swarm over us, but Dante held them off with snarls and the baring of his fangs. I was his kill, they said. Letting go of the hammer, I managed to get my left hand around Dante's chin without him biting it off the wrist. Blood red filled his eyes, obliterating retina and pupil, until all that remained was a crimson sclera. The remains of those he had drank dripped upon his face, like hot splashes of metal.
See!
I urged, seizing his noble chin in my grasp. Dante struggled, and I felt the awesome strength in his limbs.
Look into my eyes and know me.
Still, Dante fought to claim his kill. I had to stop him somehow, appeal to the man inside the monster.
You are not a beast. You are Dante.
I held him fast and thought I felt the struggles ease a little.
Know me. Tushan,
I said, my expression filled with silent urging.
Your friend. Your brother.
Dante blinked, and the feral look in his eyes softened, though did not retreat entirely. He gagged, and I let him go.
Stop!
He shouted, weary, sated.
Brothers!
Stop this! Dante's senses returned, the lucidity of the moment reasserting itself as the enslavement to his baser instincts diminished. Slowly at first, but confounded enough so as to pose no further immediate threat to my warriors, the blood angels emerged from their red thirst. It is within us, he said. A curse, Rising, I glanced at my drakes for them to stand down. I waved Dante's words away.
You never will have to explain yourself to me, brother.
Dante looked surprised at first. About to smile, his mood turned grim at the sight of Abathor's remains. I missed it, he uttered to himself. To me, his kin, it didn't matter. The blood, it's always in the blood. Averting his eyes from the dead and returning them to me, he said, You honor me. You honor us. I could not want for a stauncher ally than you, Touchon. I bowed to acknowledge his words, but Dante wasn't finished. I asked you to look into my eyes, brother. Do so again now, and tell me what you see. I saw red, an ocean of crimson, a darkness encroaching at the edge of every thought and violent deed, a thirst, a madness. I was reminded of the mosaic, the struggle between light and dark, described by the artist.
An exemplar, a noble warrior worthy of my respect.
I clapped my hand upon his shoulder as he had done to me.
I see a friend, Dante.
His smile turned rueful, his eyes faded back to what they were before, all but tempered with regret. Burdens. That is what you see. I have mine, you have yours. Our desire is the same, to keep our brothers on an even path, to guard against sedition, and to ward our souls from damnation.
Burdens,
I echoed, knowing we would have to raise the sunken citadel to ash.
But neither of us need bear them alone.
Our charge is to be alone, Touchon. I shook my head, finally understanding.
A brotherhood is never alone, Dante.
Well, folks, that's all the time I have for today. I wish to thank scholar and scribe Nick Kime for most of this, and I hope you enjoyed it. If you did, please like, follow, and subscribe. Have a great day, and as always...
Until next time, this is Zeckthar, signing off.